Hi everyone, it's Zara here with Cat Sitter Toronto Inc. Today I read a post online about Toronto Humane Society and how they were looking for donations of blankets, towels, sheets, things like that. I shared the post, but then I got inspired and I thought I would show you guys how to make some easy no-sew or easy sew, depending on what skills you have and what you're willing to do, blankets for your pets. So you can either make these for your own pets or you can make them for foster pets. You could also make them and donate them to local cat shelters or dog shelters. Animal shelters and rescue groups are always looking for donations like this. So without further ado, let's get started and make some blankets. So as you see here, I have got a nice big piece of fleece. Luna's in love with it, already playing and jumping all over it. She loves when I sew stuff, and often it gets covered with cat fur, which is great that this is going to be intended for pet use. I did find a really good description. She's chasing Fang now. A really good description on what sizes to use on a website called sewing.org, where they actually talked about making snuggle blankets for pets. And they recommended 12 inch by 12 inch for cats and smaller animals, and then 24 inches by 24 inches for the larger ones, and then 36 is by 36. So essentially giant square sheets. Essentially, you can make your blanket however big you want or however small you want, depending on the pet you're making it for. As you can see, Fang and Luna are in here, and they're pretty big kitties. So I'm going to use them as my basis and probably make my blankets a little bit bigger. And this will also help out in the shelter because they won't be as limited with what they'll be able to do with them. So the first one I'm going to do is a basic no-sew one, where you're going to measure it out and cut the fabric and end up with a blanket with finished edges, as fleece does not fray and unravel when washed. So you can cut the edge and not have to sew it up in order for it to be a finished seam. So I'm going to get right to work cutting here, and I'll show you guys it all in a minute. When cutting fabric, I like to invest in fabric scissors. These ones are titanium, so they're really a good brand. I picked them up at Fabricland. But if you're not a sewer, investing in a pair of sewing shears or sewing scissors isn't really a good option for you. Feel free to use whatever scissors you have lying around. Just pay respect to the thickness of fabric that you're cutting and the durability of the scissors. So if you have a really good utility pair of scissors, nice and thick, they should be able to cut through most of the fabrics that you would be using when making a do-it-yourself blanket. So I'm going to get right to cutting this. I'm going to cut along the folded seam here. I always find it easier if I'm cutting a big piece from an even bigger piece. I fold it and then I cut along the fold. That way I don't have to worry about measuring and marking, but do what you're comfortable with. It is, after all, a blanket for a pet, so I'm thinking a few errors are probably okay. But if you're making a blanket for somebody in your life and you want it to look really fabulous, you might want to actually mark it with a chalk or a fabric pencil and use a straight edge of a yardstick or a level, any straight edge that would indicate that your fabric is in the position you want it to be in. So without further ado, here I go cutting the fabric. Get right in there and just start cutting. So I've managed to cut so far 2 big blanket pieces from my green fleece. I just wanted to bring attention to this finished edge that you will find on fabrics that you purchase. This is called the selvage, and it's just the edge of the fabric from where the machine, from the weaving machines that they use to make the fabric. It's best to cut that off, especially if you're going to do any sewing. This is a really tough fabric to sew through, and it has been known to break needles if you don't have the right needle in to sew through. So I'm just going to go ahead and trim off the selvage from my pieces here, and then I'll be showing you the other options that you can do for no-sew. So here we have an already cut no-sew fleece blanket. Fleece comes in lots of different varieties and thicknesses. I like using polar fleece when making a no-sew blanket. It just has a really nice weight to it and it doesn't curl up on the edges. Fleece is one of those fabrics you don't have to seal off the seams. It won't fray in the washing machine, so it's great to just cut and leave. And there's one already completed blanket. Now I'm going to show you a way to finish these edges if you wanted to, which will just give it a little bit more style and add a little bit more skill level to making a blanket. So I have my next pieces of fleece cut, and for this one I'm going to make a fringe border. Now you can make the length of your fringes however long you'd like. For larger blankets it is recommended for like 5 inches. I'm going to do, I think, 2 inches on this one just because it's not a very big blanket and I really just want to have a nice fringy edge, not tie it up or finish it in any other way. So corners can be tricky when it comes to cutting fringe. The rule of thumb is to cut out a square with the same dimensions as your fringe from each corner. So this corner here that I'm going to start with, I'm going to measure out a 2-inch by 2-inch square and cut that out. And then I'll do that for each corner. To make it easier, I'm going to actually take a piece of cardboard or cardstock and make myself a template that's 2-inch by 2-inch so I can easily assess the corner there and cut it out. I'm working in my office today, I'm not using my big Singer sewing machine that I have in my sewing room. I'm just using my little Singer Sew Stitch Quick. Really any sewing machine will do the work that we're going to be doing today. I just have this cool little tool and thought I would use it. That way I don't have to relocate to my sewing room. So I'm going to get started sewing the hem on the flannel pet blanket now. Here's a quick way to get the curve on the edge of a blanket so you don't have to worry about corners. What I do is I take a plate, depending on how big of a curve I want on my edges, and I put the plate just so it positions so that each of the sides are touching the fabric, and then this is the part here that I would cut off. If you do that on all 4 corners, then all your corner curves match, and it does make it easier when sewing the edges. Here is one corner that I have cut using the plate method. And as you can see, if I move the plate over, it matches up just perfectly with the curve. So doing that on all 4 corners will make sure that all 4 corners of your blanket match and that you don't have to worry about cutting angles or figuring out pi and circumference and radius or any of that. Just use a circle object and put it in place to get the curve that you desire for the size of your blanket. As I said at the beginning of the video, I was inspired today upon reading a post from the Toronto Humane Society that said they needed blankets for incoming puppies that were coming to Toronto for adoption. So I've been at this since about 10 o'clock this morning, and I think it's around 4 o'clock, and I have made 12 different blankets with different edges and different techniques used. I hope you enjoy this video, and I hope it does inspire you to do a small thing, whether it be for your own pet or for somebody else, or even for a rescue or an animal shelter like the Toronto Humane Society. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them.